Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone watching, and welcome to a really special interview with Professor Luke O'Neill, a scientist here at Trinity who researches, among other things, viruses like COVID-19. Luke has very kindly agreed to answer the questions that you, the young people in our community, have about COVID-19. I want to thank everyone out there who submitted a question, and I'd also like to thank their parents and guardians for helping them do so. This video has been produced by Trinity Development and Alumni. The last year has been tricky for everyone. Lots of time at home, not as much time at school and with our friends and extended family, and daily news about the virus keeping it in our minds all the time. One of the best ways to understand and feel better about the COVID-19 situation in Ireland today is to ask questions and listen to the answers of experts like Professor O'Neill. And it is an honor to share your brilliant questions with him today. Luke, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
That's fine, Michael. Happy to be here.
To start us off, would you mind telling us a little bit about what you do? We had a question from Elsa in fourth class from Dundalk, and she was asking why and how you became a professor.
Sure. I love talking about myself, Elsa. That's a good one, yes. Well, I got interested in biology in school, in secondary school. I did biology for the Leaving Cert. Really good teacher, actually, a guy called Fran Mooney. I always mention him. Fran Mooney was, I think we were his first class, to be honest. He was just qualified. And he got us all into biology, And then I wanted to do science in university because I thought science would be good. Did biochemistry in Trinity. And then I went to London and I did immunology and I thought about the immune system. And then became a professor, I suppose, eventually. Got a job back in Ireland eventually. I was in Cambridge for a while, got back to Ireland. And then I got promoted to full professor. That was about 10 years ago now, I guess. So, and the important thing is, Michael, is you get promoted in university if you make discoveries, if you're a scientist. And I'd made 3 or 4 quite important discoveries about the immune system, and then that gets recognized by a promotion.
Brilliant. Thank you, Luke. So in general, there were 2 types of questions that were submitted, more basic and broad questions about COVID-19, and then questions about the vaccines specifically. So I'll start with the general questions. And to begin with, we have a few related questions about the origins of the coronavirus. So Alexandra, who's 7 from Cork, asked, where did the coronavirus start and what does it look like? And Leah, age 6, asked the same thing. How did the coronavirus come? And finally, Rion in 3rd class also wanted to know, what color is COVID-19 when you look at it through a microscope?
They're great questions, aren't they? Yeah, brilliant. Well, it's a very important question because if we know where it came from, we might stop it happening again. And of course, we do wonder, could this ever happen again? Now, the more knowledge we have, the better. And Michael, you said it earlier. I mean, if people are worried or anxious, it's always good to get knowledge and get information because that gives us a bit more, makes us feel better, I suppose, that we know things. And science actually is about trying to understand things. That's its mission, And any branch of science can understand the stars or our bodies or whatever it might be. I happen to be trying to understand the immune system. Now, with this virus, then we know it came from a bat. And the virus was infecting bats. The coronavirus, it's called. And then it jumped from a bat into a human. We don't quite know when or where that happened. Probably late 2018, we think, is when this event happened. And now the virus was now in a human body, never, ever had been in a human body before. So the person had never experienced this virus before. And then it got a foothold and began to grow and then began to spread from one human to another. It's amazing to think that a single human being triggered this whole big pandemic, isn't it, really? And it's called a coronavirus because under the microscope, it's got a crown, looks like a crown on it, amazing, like a king or a queen. And that's the outside of the virus. And these are called spikes. And they look like little bits of crown, I suppose. And it's the spikes that stick into our lungs when the virus goes into our body. So we breathe it in. And those spikes stick now and go inside our lungs. And that's when all the problems can happen, really. Down a microscope, it's pretty colorless. It doesn't have much of a color. Although we sometimes use special dyes to stain viruses to make them, seem a bit easier than otherwise. Otherwise, they're almost invisible, And you'll see pictures of this virus if you look at it on Google or whatever. Those are magnified 30 million times. Isn't that incredible? So my finger there, see that size there? If that was the virus, it's 30 million times magnified. It's incredible, isn't it, to think how small these things are.
It's amazing. We have a question from Darius from Cork, and he asks, when will the people who have coronavirus not have it anymore?
Yes. Well, again, the immune system is very good at beating this virus. And it takes about 14 days. And now you're free of it. It's fantastic in a way. Now, some people have long symptoms. We call this long COVID. It might go on for, say, 2 or 3 months in some people. But again, after a few months, it's gone away. So that's the time it takes to clear the virus.
Eleanor, aged 5, has a question. Why are we going back to school if the virus is still here?
Yes, well, education is very important. And I bet you miss your friends, and you aren't learning stuff. So we know keeping children out of school can be really bad for them. And that's been shown in previous situations like this. And the risk of doing harm, and you miss your friends, you get upset, you're not learning, that could be harmful to you. That risk outweighs the harm from the virus, we think, and they weighed the two up. The government have looked at this, you see. And we know schools are pretty safe, with ventilation and the hand. Remember, everybody should wash their hands, and then, very important to keep your distance from people, stay in your bubble. All that decreases the risk of spread, you see. And lastly, but remember something very important. If you get infected and you're under 20, say, it's a really, really benign, nothing to worry about type disease. It's fantastic because your immune system is so good when you're young. Like when you're young, you're a bit more agile, a bit stronger than older people. And your immune system is as well, you see. So you clear the virus very effectively. So we don't have too many worries about children going back to school.
Brilliant. So Henry, Sean and Taylor all had a similar question on their minds. When will COVID end? And is it ever going to stop? And will it always stay around on the planet, or will it eventually go away for good?
Yeah, they're such important questions. And we all scientists, we ask ourselves that every day, really, because we'd love it to go away, wouldn't we? If I could click my fingers like that and it's gone, wouldn't that be brilliant, That's not going to happen. Now, what we do think is going to happen is this. The virus, the vaccines that we have that we may talk about, they really fight the virus, So once we have lots of people vaccinated, the virus has less places to hide. And then it begins to go down and down and down and down. And now we can think about getting rid of this virus. Now, what will happen, and it'll take 3, 6, 9 months, we think, by the way, we'll get to a stage when there's almost no virus around because everybody's been vaccinated. And that's really great. Now, it'll probably still be here and there. We've never got rid of other viruses, really. Only one virus ever we got rid of. It's called the smallpox virus. So it's quite hard to completely get rid of viruses. And we learn to live with them. And it comes back from time to time. And we use vaccines now to protect the older people, the ones who are vulnerable, and then they don't get as sick. That's the plan out of this, really. And I would predict, certainly by the time we get to September, October, November time, if we're lucky and if everything goes according to plan, things will look pretty normal, and certainly a year from now, I would say things will look normal. There's a couple of things we don't know. We can't be 100% sure about that, but that's not unreasonable to keep that in your mind. And once we get to the autumn, things begin to look a little bit normal again.
That's great to hear. Rose in junior infants has a question I think that's been on everyone's mind, at least occasionally. Why can't people do what they're told so that COVID goes away and I can go out to play with my friends?
Now, there we have it. That's what the government is wondering as well. I think most people have done very well. Now, remember, as everybody might remember and might know, there was a big increase in January. That's why we're in this lockdown at the moment, right? It went up very, very fast. And the reason for that was people began to mix too much at Christmas time indoors. This virus loves being indoors. It spreads much more easily if we're all indoors together. And I might infect someone else and they infect someone else. If you go outdoors, it blows away. It's fantastic. So the risk outdoors is about 19 times less, which is a lot compared to indoors. At Christmas, we all went back indoors, didn't we, for Christmas time? It's winter. We began meeting each other for little Christmas parties here and there, and the virus began to take off. Now, the good news is the lockdown we've had, it came all the way down again. We're famous in the world in Ireland for the biggest rise and then the biggest drop. Isn't that great? Because people did then stop mixing, stop mingling. They followed all the guidelines. As we all know, the schools were closed, as everybody knows. So people did, I guess, behave themselves. Now, of course, our worry now would be they'll start to misbehave again. Now that the summer's coming, the only good news is we'll be outdoors more, so it'll be less risky, But people must keep up with everything and I keep reminding people, keep the distancing, wash your hands, very important. Very simple, Michael, as people know. Avoid the 3 C's. Keep this in your mind. The 3 C's are crowds, right? Closed places, meaning indoors, and close contact. Avoid those 3 C's, and this virus will be on the run. It'll begin to go away, So we just want to remind ourselves, avoid the 3 C's. That's the thing to do for these next few months.
3 C's we can all take away.
Yep.
2 dog-related questions for you, Luke. Tom, who is 2.5 years old and from Dublin, asks, is it safe for me to play with my neighbour's dog? And Anya, who's 9 years old, asks, if you have a dog that you walk regularly and you get coronavirus and live by yourself, can you still go out and walk your dog?
You can, absolutely. Now, dogs are very important. We love dogs, don't we? And they're our best friend, aren't they? We call them that sometimes. And remember, a very important thing is your own immune system to keep it healthy, because that will fight any virus that comes into you. And even though, as I said, children are really, to do very well, you might as well keep your immune system as healthy as you can. One thing that damages your immune system is if you worry too much. So if you are worrying, tell your parents, talk to a friend, go for a walk with the dog. That will de-stress you. Dogs are a great way to relax, And it's very clear, dogs can't get infected from us, for instance, and the virus won't live on a dog. It's very unlikely that you'll catch it off a dog. So I'd have no worries about taking dog for a walk. And even if you're infected yourself, wear your mask on. And remember, if you have an infection, you're supposed to stay home. That's very important. So you shouldn't maybe go for a walk in your garden, but don't be going outdoors if you're infected. You got to wait the 14 days. That's the rule. Now, because in that 14 days, your body kills the virus and you're back to normal, and you don't want to go out because you might spread it. And even though you might wear a mask and so on, it's still follow the guidelines and stay home.
Brilliant. So we had a lot of questions about the vaccines that are being rolled out currently, and I thought we could take some time and answer those now. We had 2 questions here. One was, can you spread COVID-19 even if you are vaccinated? And that's from Grace in Monkstown. And Sophie in the 3rd class asks, when everyone is vaccinated, will we still have to wear masks?
We won't. Let's start with Sophie's question first. If we get everybody vaccinated, it's the end of this virus. There's a very clear fact. Now, when I say end, what I meant was it'll almost go away. There will be little outbreaks here and there, but they'll be very minor, So that's why the vaccine is so important. What the vaccine does is very simple. It gives you a coat of armor to protect you from getting infected. That's the first thing it does. And we know we've got 3 vaccines in Ireland at the moment, and maybe some people have grandparents who've been vaccinated. They now have a coat of armor on them and they will not get infected. Isn't that tremendous? And what the vaccines really do is they stop you getting really sick. They stop you ending up in hospital, getting sick, and then tragically, of course, people do die from this virus. They stop that 100%. Isn't that tremendous? Now, the question is, you might have your armor on, but will you spread the virus to someone else? That was the first question. And in truth, we don't know. Now, science sometimes doesn't know things, and we're trying to find out, especially if something's new. This virus is still very new, remember, so we're still trying to study it and understand it, Now, what this means is, by the way, if you get the vaccine, how it works is it brings out your immune troops. And did you know your immune system lives in your bones? People don't realize this. That's where the castle is, if you will, where all the soldiers are. The troops come out of the castle from the bones into your bloodstream, and now they're in your body, and they go back into the castle again. Now, when you're infected, those immune troops eventually get to the lungs and they see the bad guy, and they're trained to recognize him, and they can kill him, right? Now, when you're reinfected, then the troops are now trained. They've seen the bad guy, And what vaccines do is they show the troops a piece of the virus. They don't show the whole virus because that might make you sick, you see. So they show, let's say it's a cowboy who's got a black hat on, You just use the black hat. You show the black hat to the troops, you see, or the sheriff and the cowboys. And then when the virus turns up with his black hat on, you can arrest him, and put him in jail. It's fantastic, you see. And that's how vaccines work. Now, what's interesting is the vaccines work really well for your lungs. So the troops are all now in your lungs and they're waiting for the virus. Sometimes they don't get as far as your nose. And what that means is the virus might linger in your nose. And even though you don't get sick, because if the virus does go to your lungs and gets beaten up, it's still in your nose, and maybe that would infect someone else and make them sick, and we still don't fully know. Now, the evidence is, though, and it's a science in action, the evidence is there is less virus in the noses of people who are infected. And one of the vaccines was 4 times less. That's a great result, because that means even if there is some, it'll be a tiny bit, and then you won't be spreading it. And that's our dream. We'd love the virus to do 2 things. Suit of armor to stop you getting infected and getting sick, right, and protect your body, and then you don't spread it to someone else, because that means the virus has nowhere to go. Isn't that tremendous? And if everybody gets vaccinated, we're all now protected and nobody's spreading it anymore, and then we see the virus is really, really in trouble in that situation.
We have a question here from Jessie, who is 7 years old, living in Dublin. And Jesse asks, when testing a vaccine on animals, how do you know if it works? And what type of animal do you test on?
Well, we try to avoid or minimize animals. Let's start with that first of all, because obviously we don't want to be harming animals. But the trouble is you have to go to animals first because it's too dangerous to try something new on a human, So what you do is you get a group of animals, and they're usually monkeys actually, because they're quite close to us, and you give them the vaccine, right? And then do you know what you do? You actually infect them with the virus. Isn't that amazing? The SARS-CoV-2 virus. Now, you don't give them enough that they're going to get really sick, actually, because we don't want to harm them. We want to minimize that as much as we can. Small amount of virus, and then you see if the vaccine stops them getting infected. Isn't that amazing? And you also measure their immune system to the virus, you see. So you know then the troops have been trained. And in the experiment, you'll vaccinate some monkeys and you won't vaccinate others. And of course, what they showed was the ones who are vaccinated, when you give them the virus, they don't get sick. And now we know the vaccine's working, you see. Now, and you test for safety, you make sure the vaccine doesn't harm them. And the monkeys are they're kept healthy, they're given probably an extra treat that day because they've been tested, Now, then we go to humans next, and then we gave this vaccine to at least 15, 20,000 humans. Isn't that an amazing number? And then we left another 10,000 without the vaccine, and then let them go about their business in countries where the virus was circulating, And guess what? The ones with the vaccine didn't get infected. Isn't that tremendous? And didn't get sick and didn't have in hospital. Whereas the ones that weren't vaccinated, they did show a level of infection. And now we know it's working in humans. And then secondly, we test if they're protected. But secondly, again, we look for any kind of nasty side effects, because sometimes things, they're called side effects. And again, they didn't have any side effects. Isn't that tremendous? So by November, we knew we had 3 vaccines that were efficacious, helping people and not getting sick and so on, and also didn't have any side effects. And they're the ones we now have. And remember, those vaccines have now been in between them all 3, I would say 150 million people. Isn't that amazing? And again, we haven't seen any problems, and we're seeing evidence it is protecting people. That's wonderful in places like Israel, where they got the vaccine before us, and in the UK. And evidence is there now. It's working in a real life situation, not in a test. That's tremendous.
The next question is actually a voice note. Let me know if you can hear this okay, Luke.
So I know from my own research that in the COVID virus, the protein spikes latch onto your cells. So does the vaccine stop this from happening, or does it work entirely differently?
It does. That's a great question. So what you use is, I actually have a model of the virus, which I can hold up here. So here's a model of the virus. Now you can imagine, again, this has been magnified. If this was the real virus, it'd be 40 million times smaller. So there's the spikes. You see these little things around the outside, right? Now, you take that spike, and that's the vaccine, okay? You inject that in people's bodies, and you make things called antibodies to that spike. Now, antibodies, and luckily enough, I have it here, wasn't expected, are like blue tack, right? And that blue tack now sticks onto the spike, like it masks it like that. The blue tack is now over it, and that can't stick in your lungs anymore. And that's the main way these vaccines work. They bring out the immune system. Antibodies are made to cover the virus and stop it sticking to your lungs, and it slips away. It doesn't get into your cells. Isn't that tremendous? That's one way these vaccines work, and it's probably the main way. So antibodies are the part of the immune system that are really good at targeting, germs, in this case, the virus. The second thing you get are things called T cells, and they're a very special cell type, and they recognize the spike as well. And guess what T cells do? They wake up the entire immune system. They're like the bugler, if it's an army, blowing on its bugle, And now the immune system is awake, so you need the T cell and the antibodies. The antibodies are made by B cells. That's the name of the cell type that makes the antibodies, and both of those come out. But it was a great question, because antibodies blocking the spike are a very important part of how these vaccines work.
So our next set of questions come from Anna, who's 10, and Patrick, who is 9. And they ask, what's in the COVID vaccine that makes it work so well? And why is the vaccine given in 2 parts?
Yep, great questions as well. So let's take 2 of the vaccines. The Pfizer, it's called Pfizer-BioNTech, and the other one is called Moderna. They both have the recipe to make the spike. And the recipe is called RNA. I know it's a tricky thing to remember, but there's a recipe, just like a recipe to make a cake now. And that recipe is called RNA. That goes into your muscle, and your muscle starts to make the spike. Now, this is the spike from the virus, remember, but it isn't the whole virus, it's a piece of it. And now that wakes up the immune system, right? Now, in the case of AstraZeneca, that vaccine, get this, they put, again, the recipe for the spike, into a cold virus, a virus that causes the common cold. Isn't that amazing? And this is a dead virus. It won't give you a cold, but it's a way to get it into your body. And now you make the spike, and again, you wake up the immune system. So that's the way those two vaccines work. There's at least 7 different types of vaccines, though. They're the main ones we have at the moment. One of them is interesting. It's the whole virus, right? And it's been disabled. It's actually been treated with chemicals, and that's used as a vaccine. Now, that's got loads of things for the immune system to see, not just the spike, you see. So that may turn out to be a really effective vaccine. Yeah? But they're the main ways that these vaccines work.
Thanks, Luke. And finally, just a question from myself. If any of the children watching this video have a passion for science and want to become a scientist like yourself, do you have any advice you could share with them? We had a lot of questions coming in about becoming a scientist, like from Ruan, who's in 5th class, and who said that you work in a very interesting area and asked if it took a long time to become a professor.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what my research was actually about. It was about the immune system, as I said, and I wasn't working on vaccines, actually. What I work on is therapies. If you end up in hospital and you're very sick, what I'm working on is medicines to protect your lungs and stop you getting sick. They're called anti-inflammatory medicines. That's my area. And I work on vaccines as well to some extent because I'm an immunologist and we're very interested in them. The vaccine bit, I'm very interested in how we deliver vaccines, for instance, to the body. I've got an interest in that. But to get to that point, well, it is a bit of a journey. But I wouldn't worry about how long it takes. So if you're interested in science, that's tremendous. That's the first thing, okay? And my advice is just keep looking at science on the TV, wherever it might be. Just follow your interest. And I ended up an immunologist, but you might end up an astronomer. Art the stars, fantastic. Imagine doing that, you know. You might end up as a plant scientist studying plants. You might end up as a zoologist studying animals. There's so many different parts to science, you know. And I would just say, if you're interested, keep at it and keep reading and keep talking to other people about science. It's tremendous, you know. And then when you go to secondary school, you will do science now. It's part of, even you've done science in primary school, I know, but you'll do science for the junior cert. And then you might pick biology, chemistry, physics, types of science, you see. And if you're still into it, like I was, then you go to college and you do science in college and you pick a type of science you love. And then you get a degree, you get a BSc, and that's after your name. And then if you want to be a research scientist and work in a lab like I did, you have to do a thing called a PhD, and that takes a bit longer. But don't worry, that's years away, you know. And the most important message of all is, if you love something, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be science, just do it, you know, do what you love. And it can be anything. And of course, you got to try to figure out what you love. It takes a bit of time, actually, to figure that out. But there's the advice. And the last piece of advice I would give, and because you haven't done it, Michael, I'm going to shamelessly plug my book. Are you ready?
Ready.
The Great Irish Science Book. I wrote that a year ago. It's all of science in a book, and you can buy it in any bookshop. And let me show you this little chapter. This came out 2 years ago. The immune system. Look at that. Now, it's all of science, right? But I've got a whole 2 pages on the immune system. And there's a vaccine in action, strangely. There's the sheriff, you know, and he's calling out the immune system with these sheep. Isn't that great? So that's a good book to read. And not necessarily my book. There are some fantastic books out there about science, you know. And there's loads of stuff online you can read as well, you know. So I would just try to do a bit of reading, watch a good movie about science, watch Contagion. That's all about a virus, you know. Just whatever you're interested in. Just I suppose, read stuff and start to figure out what it is you like is the real advice.
Fantastic, Luke. Thank you so much for giving your time today to answer all of these terrific questions.
Yeah, no problem, Mike. I'm very happy to help. Great questions, everybody. They were fantastic.
Thank you also to everyone watching this video, to the Trinity alumni community, and to all of the young people for asking the questions. We hope that this video has helped you better understand COVID-19 and the pandemic and the situation that we are facing together. With understanding comes reassurance, and I hope you take comfort in the answers and understanding that this video has brought. I know I certainly feel a lot better and more hopeful having spoken with Luke. So please follow Trinity Development and Alumni's social media channels at TCD Alumni and stay in touch so that you can find more fun activities to do with your loved ones over the break. Thank you again. Thank you to Luke. Stay safe and have a wonderful day.